She's mine. And just like that, the entire room knew something was about to go very, very wrong. The low hum of quiet deals and expensive laughter collapsed into silence. A glass tapped too hard against a marble table. Somewhere near the windows, a violinist faltered. At the center of it all, under a chandelier that glittered like power itself, Jessica Laurent didn't move. She didn't have to. In rooms like this, high above downtown Chicago, everything usually moved for her. Security reacted first, stepping in with sharp urgency. Eyes locked. Hands ready. Because the man standing near the velvet rope didn't belong. Worn leather jacket. Rough hands. The kind of presence that wasn't loud, but didn't bend either. And beside him, a little girl. Small. Still. Holding on to him like he was the only certain thing in the room. Welcome back and thank you for choosing to spend your time here with us at Tales. Your presence means everything, and we promise this story will stay with you long after it ends. If you believe in stories that change perspectives, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's build this community together. Now, let's get into the story. Sir, you need to. She's mine. Softer now. Stronger. Jessica finally looked up. And that's when it hit. Not the interruption. Not the audacity. But the girl. Those eyes. That face. Too familiar. Too close. Her voice came out steady, but thinner than she expected. Who are you? The man met her gaze without hesitation. David Carter. A beat. You don't know me, he said. Then, quieter. But you know her. The silence didn't fade. It thickened. Like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting to see who would break first. This wasn't just any room, it was Chicago's inner circle. Venture capitalists. Political donors. CEOs who moved markets with a phone call. People who didn't watch moments like this, they controlled them. And right now, they were watching Jessica Laurent. The woman who never lost control. The woman who never got caught off guard. Her expression hardened, slipping back into something familiar, something sharp. Composed. Untouchable. You're mistaken, she said evenly, her voice cutting clean through the tension. But her eyes betrayed her. They kept drifting back to the little girl. Studying. Measuring. Recognizing something she couldn't explain. Around the room, whispers started building, low, cautious, but alive. Is this a setup? Some kind of lawsuit? Who even let them in here? Security shifted closer. David didn't move. Neither did the girl. If anything, she stepped forward, just slightly. Brave in a way that didn't belong in a room like this. My name is Ava, she said softly. The innocence in her voice didn't match the weight of the moment. My dad said, you might not believe us. That landed harder than anything else. And if you've ever stood somewhere you weren't wanted, you already know how this feels. Because some people look away. And some people step forward anyway. David exhaled once. Then said it, clear enough for everyone to hear. She's your daughter. The words didn't echo. They detonated. For a split second, no one moved. Then the room fractured, sharp inhales, chairs scraping, a glass tipping somewhere in the distance. Jessica Laurent didn't flinch. But something behind her eyes did. That's not possible, she said, her voice calm, controlled, practiced. The kind of voice that had shut down billion-dollar negotiations without a second thought. But it didn't land the same this time. Because she was still looking at the girl. Still tracing the details she shouldn't recognize. The curve of her cheek. The shape of her eyes. The quiet way she held herself, like she was observing everything, not afraid, just aware. The girl took another small step forward. "My name is Ava," she said. Soft. Steady. Not intimidated. "My dad said you'd probably say that." A ripple moved through the crowd, quieter now, more focused. This wasn't a stunt. It didn't feel like one. Jessica's jaw tightened slightly. Her mind was already working, running through possibilities, angles, risks. Control. She needed control. But for the first time in a long time, control felt out of reach. Her gaze snapped back to David. Sharp now. Demanding. "Explain. One word. No room for error. No room for lies." And something about the way she said it made the entire room realize. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. Jessica didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. Because something about the way he said it, calm, grounded, certain, didn't feel like a lie. It felt like history. David took a slow breath, like a man stepping back into a moment he never wanted to revisit. 8 years ago, he began, his voice steady but heavier now, "You funded a biotech program." Jessica's expression didn't change, but her eyes did. Recognition. Faint. Distant. But there. "Experimental fertility trials," he continued. "Anonymous donors. No long-term contact. No accountability." A murmur rippled through the room. This was no longer just personal, it was dangerous. Jessica remembered. Not clearly. Not emotionally. Just, professionally. A proposal. A projection. A signature at the bottom of a page she barely looked at twice. It had been strategy. Nothing more. "I invested in hundreds of programs," she said coolly. "That doesn't." "Yeah," David cut in quietly. "That's kind of the point." That landed. Harder than anything else so far. He glanced down at Ava for just a second, then back at Jessica. "Something in that program didn't go the way it was supposed to," he said. A pause. Or maybe it did. Jessica's stomach tightened. For the first time that night, the room wasn't watching a disruption. They were watching a truth, starting to surface. David let the silence sit for a moment, not to build tension, but because this part mattered. "I wasn't supposed to keep her," he said finally. The words were simple. But they carried weight. The program made it clear, no attachments, no contact, no responsibility after birth. A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't business anymore. This was something else. David's hand rested gently on Ava's shoulder. "But when I saw her," he continued, his voice quieter now, less guarded, "that wasn't a contract anymore." Ava looked up at him, her small fingers tightening around his. "That was my daughter." Jessica didn't interrupt. Didn't deflect. She just listened. And that alone was new. "I was working double shifts back then," David added. "Small garage on the south side. Barely keeping the lights on." He let out a faint breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "No roadmap. No help. Just, figuring it out as I went." A pause. But she never went without what mattered. Ava leaned into him slightly. And in that small, quiet gesture, the entire room felt it. Some people build empires. And still miss what's right in front of them. Others build a life from nothing. And somehow give everything. David looked back at Jessica, steady again. "I didn't come here for money." A beat. "I came because she deserves the truth." The room seemed to shrink around them. Glasses clinked softly in the distance, but the sound felt miles away. Jessica's gaze, sharp and controlled for years, softened as it fell on Ava. She wasn't a problem to solve. Not a disruption. She was a child. Ava's small hand slipped from David's fingers, stepping forward as if testing the invisible line between fear and courage. "I just wanted to meet you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Jessica blinked. Words faltered in her throat, an unfamiliar, weightless sensation. This was not negotiation. Not a boardroom. Not a press release. This was pure, unfiltered truth. "I wanted to see if you laugh like me," Ava added, tilting her head, eyes wide and hopeful. The simplicity of it hit Jessica harder than any calculated confrontation ever could. 8 years of absence, 8 years of unanswered questions, boiled down to a single, innocent inquiry. David watched silently, a hand still resting on Ava's shoulder, his jaw tight but composed. Jessica swallowed, feeling the walls around her chest tremble. She had built empires, brokered billion-dollar deals, commanded rooms, but in this moment, she had no playbook, no strategy. Only curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, a faint, terrifying glimmer of something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Her voice came out quieter than she intended, almost unsteady. "You want to know me?" Ava smiled. "Yes." Jessica drew a slow, deliberate breath, feeling every eye in the room pressed down on her. Board members. Investors. Journalists in waiting. All of them, waiting for the calculated Jessica Laurent to react. She surprised herself, and them. "Clear my schedule tomorrow," she said, voice steady. Murmurs rippled through the room. "But your board meeting." "I said clear it," she interrupted, letting the authority in her tone leave no room for argument. David's eyes flicked to her, guarded but curious. He had expected walls, cold dismissal, or even anger. Instead, he saw something else, intention. Careful, unpolished, but undeniable. Jessica looked at Ava, really looked, past the reflection of her own features, past the shock of recognition. This was a child who had waited 8 years to meet the mother she deserved. "I'd like to spend the day with you," Jessica said softly, almost hesitant, as if testing the possibility of connection. "If that's okay." Ava's face lit up. The kind of smile that could melt steel or silence a room. "Okay," she said simply, a word that carried more weight than any contract or board resolution. David studied Jessica's eyes. He wasn't measuring her wealth or her reputation. He was reading her sincerity. Ava tugged his hand, and he nodded. "Then let's see how this day goes," he said quietly. In that moment, the power in the room shifted, not money, not influence, but something far harder to wield, choice. Jessica's empire could wait. Today, she chose her daughter. The table was set for power, but tonight it held something else entirely. Crystal glasses reflected the city lights like tiny stars, and the scent of expensive cuisine hung in the air. Yet the tension that had gripped the room all evening seemed to dissolve into a fragile quiet. Jessica motioned for Ava to sit beside her. The little girl's eyes sparkled with cautious excitement, and David lingered close, hand brushing the back of her chair, not out of control, but protection. Guests whispered, their voices rippling through the luxury space. Scandal. Secrets. Headlines waiting to happen. Yet none of that mattered to the three at the table. Jessica exhaled, softening her posture for the first time in years. She reached for Ava's small hand, letting it rest lightly in hers. "You belong here," she said, voice steady yet gentle. Ava beamed, leaning slightly closer. Jessica glanced at David, meeting his eyes with a mixture of apology, admiration, and unspoken questions. "I'm still figuring out if I do," she added quietly, more to herself than anyone else. David's jaw relaxed, a silent acknowledgement of her honesty. Ava squeezed Jessica's hand, bridging the gap that years of absence had created. For the first time, Jessica didn't measure the room by wealth, influence, or power. She measured it by the possibility of connection, messy, imperfect, human. And in that suspended moment above the Chicago skyline, the three of them began something new. Something fragile, something real. Something that no boardroom could ever dictate.